Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep today into some really thought-provoking source material.
Yeah, highlights from a teaching by Dr. Roy.
Exactly. And it explores a specific passage from the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verses 33 through 47.
And right up front, it's important to say this teaching approaches the text from a purely metaphysical angle.
Offering a spiritual interpretation quite distinct from, traditional religious views.
And one of the very first shifts this teaching asks us, and you listening, to make, is in how we perceive ourselves. It suggests moving away from the term human.
Oh, interesting. Towards what?
Towards thinking of ourselves as visible spirits.
Visible spirit.
Yeah, seeing ourselves not just as physical beings, but as the visible expression, kind of the tangible form of divine energy or consciousness.
Visible spirit. Okay, I've got it. So our mission in this deep dive is really to journey through this interpretation, Dr. Roy's interpretation of this passage.
Pull out the key insights, understand these core concepts.
Right, and explore what this perspective on freedom, identity, and inner awareness could mean for you, the listener.
Exactly. So the passage kicks off with Jesus speaking to a group, people deeply rooted in their religious background.
And their immediate response, you see this in verses 33 through 38, is to claim freedom based entirely on their physical lineage. They say, we are Abraham's descendants.
Right. It's all tied to their outward identity, their status, their heritage.
They believed this external connection was their guarantee, didn't they? Their standing with what they understood as God.
And this teaching points out how that response, well, it reveals an old awareness.
An old awareness.
Meaning an awareness that relies on external performance, on who your parents were, on, historical facts. Yet, paradoxically, while they're clinging to this idea of freedom...
We were actually living in bondage.
Precisely. Bondage to fear, to religious law, and fundamentally to a mistaken identity. They were unaware of any inner separation from the source, even though they likely felt its effects.
So one of the most powerful takeaways right here, I think, is that true freedom, this abundant life it talks about, isn't dependent on anything outside of you.
Not your family name, your history, any external association, no.
It's found in awakening to your inherent inner identity, understanding yourself as sourced in Father, as this teaching puts it.
Yeah, you could be steeped in tradition, but if your inner awareness is veiled, you can still be blind to this fundamental truth of your being.
This really challenges conventional ideas, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And it immediately brings up the concept of sin within this specific framework.
Ah, yes. This is where it gets really fascinating. This teaching presents a metaphysical definition of sin from this passage.
It says Jesus isn't diagnosing bad behavior, not in the usual sense. He's revealing a fundamental reality about their state of awareness.
So sin, the Greek word hamartia.
It doesn't mean breaking a rule. It means mistaken identity. It means missing the mark of who you truly are, that you are sourced in spirit, that you are a visible spirit.
That distinction is crucial, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Living in sin, or as the passage says, serving sin, isn't about committing wrong acts necessarily.
It's about living from an identity, a state of awareness that doesn't recognize its origin in spirit.
Exactly. It's this awareness of separation that creates the bondage.
While the awareness of union produces true liberty.
Yes. It's an inner state, fundamentally not an outward record of behavior.
And the passage uses these powerful symbols that the teaching helps us decode: house, servant, son.
Okay, let's break those down. Think of the house as symbolizing conscious union with Father. It's your true, eternal, spiritual dwelling place.
Your home base, essentially.
Right. A servant, in this context, represents a mindset, an identity rooted in duty, in external law, in fear.
Effort, belief, and separation.
Exactly. It's seen as a temporary state. But the Son.
The Son speaks of an identity and awareness that knows its eternal origin in Father and dwells there continuously.
And this teaching really emphasizes that because you are a visible spirit, you are not, in your essence, a servant in that temporary, limited sense.
You are sons and daughters of God, already in perfect oneness.
Yes. This Son awareness, this awakened consciousness that knows its union with Father, knows the indwelling logos that is the truth that liberates you.
Liberates you from the false self, the bondage of fear, shame, external religious demands.
All of it. And the freedom being discussed here isn't something you earn or permission you're granted to become holy.
It's presented as your inherent position.
Your position. Knowing you already are holy, complete, perfect because of your true nature as visible spirit, sourced in Father.
Wow. Okay, so when Jesus then says in verses 39 through 43, my word has no place in you, it connects right back to this idea of veiled awareness.
Absolutely.
Right.
What's being highlighted is that the inner word, the logos, that divine spiritual intelligence active within you, it isn't being received by their conscious awareness.
Why not?
Because it's already crowded. It's full of tradition, fear, ego, preconceived notions, all that noise.
So despite their physical connection to Abraham, their inner ears weren't tuned in.
Exactly. They weren't tuned to the divine voice that was speaking right there.
And their reaction, you seek to kill me, that takes on a different meaning in this metaphysical view, too.
Yeah, it's not necessarily about plotting physical violence, though it could escalate. Spiritually, it's seen as the ego's desperate attempt to silence or reject the inner truth.
The logos.
The logos, yes,
Yeah.
because it exposes the deadness or the falseness of the internal system they're operating from.
The logos speaks, but the ego, built on that illusion of separation, resists anything that threatens its foundation.
Definitely. And this links directly to Jesus contrasting what he does with what they do. He says he speaks what he has seen with my Father.
Direct perception.
Direct, unmediated perception from conscious communion with Source. He lives from an awakened awareness.
But he tells them, you do what you have seen with your Father.
And this teaching interprets that Father not as the ultimate source, but as what Jesus later calls the Father of lies.
Which represents what?
That old law-based awareness, the ego, the illusion of separation that they've identified with so strongly.
So the choice presented here is stark, isn't it?
Very. Will you live and speak from the vision received in divine mind, from that inner knowing?
Or from the distortions inherited through living solely in the sense realm, believing the illusion that you are separate and somehow lacking or in need.
And this teaching summarizes these verses, 33 through 43, as depicting a profound inner battle.
Which it identifies with the concept of Armageddon.
Yes, Armageddon.
Wow, okay. That word usually brings up, images of massive global destruction, wars, bombs.
Right, the common understanding. But in this metaphysical interpretation, Armageddon is not a future war with bombs or international conflict.
It's something else entirely.
It is the great battle happening right now, within your conscious awareness.
A battle between what?
Between the awakened understanding of your true nature as visible spirit and the old false thought systems you've identified with.
So it's the clash between divine mind and conscious awareness, spirit and sense perception.
Logos and ego, divine truth and mistaken identity. Yes, that's the battlefield.
So the struggles people experience in their inner life, that conflict between what they feel they could be and the limitations they perceive, that's this inner Armageddon.
Precisely. And this teaching says this battle is won when you experience your day of the Lord or your last day.
Which isn't about the end of the world either.
No, it's the day you awaken fully to who you truly are, to the spiritual truth of the Logos within you. This Logos is described as the creative spiritual activity that reveals the law of abundant life.
So Armageddon happens whenever you make that choice.
Whenever you choose to rise above the old awareness, whenever that inner voice of spirit calls you to come up higher, and you decide, consciously decide, to let go of what no longer serves your true identity.
That completely reframes it. It's not something to dread, but maybe a necessary, even celebrated process.
Exactly. This teaching sees it as something to celebrate. Because as the old false systems fall away within your awareness,
there's a resurrection, an awakening.
A resurrection, an awakening in every part of your awareness. Those inner strongholds that the Apostle Paul talked about pulling down.
They're in our conscious awareness.
Right there. And Armageddon is their final yielding to the truth of who you are.
Okay, going back to the religious leaders in the passage, their resistance was really rooted in clinging to that outer identity, wasn't it? Their bloodline, their tradition.
That's what they saw as their source of righteousness.
Right. And the metaphysical perspective here flips that too.
Completely. Being a child of Abraham isn't about physical descent in this view. It's about living from the same faith awareness that Abraham embodied.
An awareness of trust, connection to source, regardless of external proof.
Exactly. And their actions in the story, their fear, their resistance, their ego-driven responses actually demonstrated they were not living from Abraham's awareness, even if they shared his bloodline.
So true lineage is spiritual.
It's spiritual.
Huh?
You are spiritually aligned with whoever's light of awareness, as the teaching puts it, you choose to walk in.
And when Jesus says, you seek to kill me, a man that told you the truth, the teaching interprets this resistance again as the ego's reaction.
Yes, the ego, based on that illusion of separation, it resists what it cannot control or understand within its limited framework.
Truth, the logos embodied, threatens the ego.
Not through violence, but just by exposing its fundamental deception, its lies.
Which leads us back to that really powerful concept Jesus introduces, the two fathers.
Yes, this teaching highlights that Jesus isn't just talking about a physical father here. He's identifying two potential sources, two origins for one's awareness.
Source itself, the father.
And the awareness rooted in separation and law, which he names the father of lies.
And this teaching suggests this father of lies could be linked to that old law-based consciousness.
Potentially, yes. Maybe even the rigid interpretation of Mosaic law and its teachers, which could trap people in an external system focused on rules rather than inner connection.
And their actions in the passage revealed they were functioning from this false paternity.
Living from the deception that they were independent, separate from source.
So the crucial insight this teaching pulls out is, wow, it's this. Whoever or whatever you allow to shape your thoughts, your core awareness.
That becomes your father in this spiritual sense.
Your awareness is the source of your experience.
And what you think from determines the fruit of your life. It reminds me of that powerful corrected translation of Paul mentioned in the source material.
Which one was that?
Be you transformed in your awareness by the renewing divine mind. It's all about where your awareness is sourced.
It really is. Okay, and this helps us understand Jesus saying, if God were your father, you would love me.
Yeah, this teaching interprets love without a cause in this context as recognizing and embracing the logos, the truth that Jesus embodies and speaks from.
So if your awareness were truly sourced in spirit,
you would naturally resonate with Jesus' words because they echo the truth already within you. They come from the same source.
But they couldn't see or receive it.
Because according to this teaching, they were trapped in the outer court, in an external focus on law, rules, legalistic interpretations.
Even a perspective focused only on the redemptive view of that outer court can keep you stuck.
If it doesn't lead you inward, yes. The teaching shares that powerful anecdote about the Apostle John's experience on Patmos, his day of the Lord.
What happened there?
While meditating, perhaps initially from that redemptive outer court perspective, his single eye opened, his inner spiritual vision awakened.
Oh, okay.
He heard the voice of spirit and saw a Son of Man in the ecclesia.
And ecclesia here means?
Not a church building, but the gathering, the full manifestation of mankind's inherent glory. Perfect, holy, upright. John became, as the teaching says, a most holy place messenger, able to speak from this inner reality.
Wow.
The teaching notes that while religious understanding often mess the words up, as it says, divine awareness recognizes itself.
So those living from spirit perceive the logos because it echoes within.
Exactly. Progressing awareness, like Ezra did with the scriptures apparently, sees through distortion to understand the original spiritual intent. And this understanding can actually cause others to recognize themselves and stand up as one manifestation of visible spirit.
That's profound. So when Jesus asks, why do you not understand my speech? Because you cannot hear my word. He's making that distinction explicit, isn't he?
Absolutely. They were hearing his natural voice, the external sounds, the speech.
But they weren't hearing the logos.
The spiritual word resonating within. The logos is received by those whose inner ears have been tuned, sensitized by spirit.
And that Greek word for hear, akouo.
It implies much more than just perceiving sound. It means understanding, receiving, allowing it to reverberate within, embracing it fully.
Speech is outer, the word is inner.
Yes. You need to awaken those inner faculties to move from merely hearing the external words to truly receiving the inner word.
This summary of verses 39 through 43 from this teaching is really helpful then. It's this fundamental contrast
between identifying with outer religion, ancestral pride, what it calls dead works, external performance,
versus aligning with inner truth, spiritual inheritance, and the living word, the logos.
Right. Jesus is highlighting the spiritual deafness that results when you identify more strongly with your heritage, your traditions, or your ego than with the spirit pulsing within you.
And it brings us back really to a key question for anyone listening, doesn't it?
Definitely. What source of awareness are you hearing from?
Is the Father of light, whose voice brings peace, union, and abundant life?
Or is it the father of lies, that old awareness, the ego, the identity built on law and separation?
Because to truly hear the word, as this teaching describes it,
Is to awaken to the voice that has always been speaking within you, just waiting to be recognized.
which leads perfectly into the concept of the devil in verses 44 through 47, which this teaching also interprets, well, metaphysically.
Yes, when Jesus says, "You are of your father the devil,"
Yeah.
this teaching says he's not talking about some literal horned creature.
No pitchforks involved?
No, he's identifying the awareness they're operating from. It's what the teaching calls carnal awareness, or the voice of mistaken identity.
And the word devil, diabolos, literally means accuser or separator.
Precisely. So it symbolizes that false voice that speaks from a sense of separation from Father. It's a mindset, you see, a state of consciousness, not an external entity.
And where did this false awareness come from?
And according to this view, it originated not because God created it, but because visible spirit, that's us, chose at some point to identify with outer voices and sense realm perception over the indwelling logos.
So the Father isn't a separate being. It's a false origin story we buy into, a limited perception.
That's the idea. A limited perception that we can fall into and identify with.
And the lusts they fulfill, it's not just physical desires.
No, it goes deeper. It's the motivations of the ego self, seeking power, justification, a sense of identity that exists apart from spirit.
And that phrase, he was a murderer from the beginning, how does that fit?
In this context, it speaks to the killing of awareness, the murder of the divine image in our understanding. This adversary, this old awareness, rooted in illusion.
It has no connection to truth.
No inherent truth. So it can only operate through lies and deception. That's its nature.
Okay. This teaching then connects this whole idea of abiding in truth back to Jesus' statement in John 15.7.
Ah, yes. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, you can speak what you will and it will be done to you.
Which is often interpreted differently.
Very differently. Often treated like a cosmic vending machine promise, right? Based on outward belief or behavior.
If I believe hard enough, I get stuff.
Kind of. But this teaching presents it as a spiritual law of inner truth and conscious union. Abiding in me means consciously dwelling, living from the awareness of divine union, your true nature as visible spirit.
And the word translated as ask, ateo, is also given a deeper meaning here.
Yes, it means more than just petitioning God from a sense of lack or need.
What else does it mean?
It means to declare, to make known a truth you've already ascertained, to seek and desire to know. The teaching even links it to the concept of true worship, recognizing what already is.
So when you are abiding in that awareness of oneness and the logos, his words, are alive in you, what you ask or declare isn't a hopeful wish flung out into the universe.
Exactly. It's speaking from a place of fullness, from a knowing. You're not trying to convince God of something he hasn't already provided or isn't already true.
You are realizing and declaring what already is true through your awakened awareness.
Your words become the expression of the voice within, not just guesses based on external appearances or fears.
And the fruit, the result of living from this abiding awareness.
A transformed life, naturally. A sense of spiritual authority, a deep knowing that nothing essential is lacking.
And you gain the ability.
The ability to speak truth to the systems of this earth, those external structures built on separation and limitation, and actually bring about change by embodying a different reality.
And the opposite is true too, living from separation thinking.
It kills the awareness of the life, the spirit, within yourself and how you perceive others. That liar Jesus talks about.
It isn't necessarily something outside you.
Often it's that inner voice of self-doubt, isn't it? Whispering, I am not enough, I am separate, I have to earn my way, I must prove my worth.
Okay, bringing it back to the resistance Jesus faced when he said, because I tell you the truth, you believe me not.
This teaching explains that phenomenon simply. Those stuck in the false awareness of separation and law cannot receive the logos easily.
Truth sounds foreign to them.
It does, because it fundamentally exposes the illusion that their false identity is built upon. Rejecting their inherent divine origin means the death of the lie they've been living. And that can feel incredibly threatening to the ego.
And Jesus' own life served as an example of living from that truth. He could ask, which of you convinces me of sin?
Right. Because he was living so fully from that union awareness, he was untouched by the false accusations rooted in the separation mindset.
There was no false identity for those accusations to stick to.
Exactly. Nothing for it to latch onto.
So to be of God in this teaching's view means...
It means living from divine mind, operating from spirit awareness. Those who live from this state don't just hear the external words. They comprehend, receive, and embrace the logos inwardly,
It resonates with what's already inside.
with the implanted spiritual reality already within them. Hearing only with a natural ear isn't enough to hear the word.
And obey, in this context, also takes on a deeper meaning.
More than just following commands, it means attentively hearing, comprehending, receiving within, and embracing what was spoken at that deep inner level.
So when people can't hear the logos, it's not presented as a judgment from this perspective, but more like a kind of diagnosis.
Exactly. This teaching clarifies it's not condemnation. They are spirit in their essence. That's the core truth.
But they aren't consciously living from that spirit awareness.
Right. Their inner ears, you could say, are tuned to the noise of the outer realm, the voice of separation, instead of the inner voice of truth.
So pulling this all together then, this deep dive, this interpretation, isn't about labeling people as good or bad.
Not at all. As this teaching concludes, Jesus' responses throughout this entire passage are revealing the reality of two fundamental awarenesses,
One birthed from the eternal logos, the truth of who we are.
and one formed in the false belief of separation. The devil, in this sense, isn't some external being,
It's the inner conversation of that false self, the voice of mistaken identity.
and the Father you live of, the source you draw from, is the awareness you choose to yield to moment by moment.
The paths seem pretty clear based on this perspective. Aligning with divine mind leads to peace, love, oneness.
While operating from that carnal awareness, that separation mindset leads to accusation, fear, division, and truth when you're identified with ego and fear,
Feels like a threat.
because it challenges the very foundation of that false identity.
And this teaching acknowledges how deeply ingrained that false awareness can be, right? Sometimes passed down through generations, through identifying with external systems or fears.
Absolutely. But it notes, deep down, you know something isn't quite right with that state. There's an inner dissonance,
And often, it's fear that keeps you stuck.
particularly the fear of rejection or maybe even condemnation from others if you let go of the old ways of thinking, the old identity. That fear keeps you locked in that limited awareness.
Which brings us to the powerful call to choice that this teaching really emphasizes.
Yes. How long will you hesitate between these two awarenesses? The truth, the divine mind, has never withheld itself. It's always present.
But spirit won't force itself.
Exactly. It won't force itself upon an awareness that resists it. At some point, you stand at that threshold of awakening, and you have to make what this teaching calls a holy resolve.
A holy resolve to.
Say, I will no longer fear the truth of who I am. I will embrace it, even if it means walking a different path, maybe alone for a season.
And the outcome of making that choice, according to this view.
This teaching says that when you choose an awareness aligned with spirit, fear begins to fade. What might have felt like losing something important.
Becomes liberation.
Profound liberation.
Yeah.
You realize you're not leaving anyone or anything truly valuable behind in the ultimate sense. You're simply stepping fully into the truth of who you've always been as visible spirit.
So the ultimate question this teaching leaves us with isn't, who taught you these concepts? Or did you read the right book?
No. It's, what are you willing to know for yourself from within?
Let the inner voice of the logos speak louder than the outer noise.
Yes. Louder than the world, louder than the ego. Allow that truth, that knowing of your identity and Father to rise within you. Today, right now, is always your moment of awakening.
So to bring this deep dive to a close, we've really spent our time exploring Dr. Roy's metaphysical interpretation of John chapter 8, haven't we?
We have. Unpacking that striking difference between living from an outward, fear-based, separation-minded awareness
Often rooted in tradition and ego.
versus living from that inner awareness of oneness, inherently sourced in spirit, awakened to the logos within you.
And we saw how concepts like sin, Armageddon, even the devil are understood very differently here.
Not as external forces or future events, but as states of awareness, inner battles unfolding right now, and the voice of mistaken identity operating within us.
We explored the symbolism of the servant identity versus the son identity.
And that powerful idea of the two fathers, representing the fundamental choice of which awareness you allow to govern your life, your thoughts, your experience.
And this teaching makes it so clear these aren't just, abstract theological ideas floating around.
Not at all. They represent the core inner choice we face constantly every day in our thoughts, our perceptions, and how we experience reality itself.
Are we tuned into the outer noise, the voice of separation and limitation?
Or are we consciously tuning into the inner voice of the Logos, the truth of our being?
Which really leaves us, and you listening, with a powerful question to sit with, doesn't it?
It does. Based on these insights about the two fathers and the call to choose our awareness, what voice is guiding your thoughts and perceptions in this very moment?
Are you primarily hearing the outer noise of fear, lack, or external definition?
Or are you tuning into that inner voice of the Logos, the truth of your perfect origin and spirit? And maybe even more importantly,
What would fundamentally shift in your experience of life if you consistently chose to live from that inner awareness?